It's simply a matter of form, Jim.
Only toffs and bookies care about form, Harry.
It's not a soapbox. It's an inquiry. And you can't play the game unless you know the rules. And I know them by heart.
You have my sympathies.
And I deserve them. It's a soul-destroying business, Jim. But it's our best chance of getting a fair hearing.
The hell with a fair hearing?
Jim, your men would follow you to their graves.
They'd be following a fool in that case.
But you can't always preach to the same choir. Let us establish our good faith. Let us show that we're seeking a solution. And let me deal with our esteemed chairman. Afterwards, I'll set you loose on Murphy.
I'm not a dog, Harry.
They're ready for you inside, Mr. Larkin.
I sincerely doubt it. Dolan, isn't it?
Dorn, sir.
You were out with me in Belfast during the dock strike.
That's right, sir.
They put you back in a uniform. Was it not chafe?
Not as much as an RIC one did.
What are you doing in Dublin?
Once you came down, they sent us all after you. Sure, these boys down here wouldn't have a clue.
If we could all take our positions, gentlemen, we might call the meeting to order. This Board of Inquiry has been convened to seek a solution to the dispute which is at present choking the air from the lungs of this great city. The issues involved are vexed and well rehearsed, but suffice to say that no greater boon could accrue to the people of Dublin than a swift and just settlement, recognizing the rights and responsibilities on all sides. Now, before we begin, I would be obliged if those representing the respective parties to this dispute would make themselves known.
Timothy Healy, counsel for Mr. William Martin Murphy and the Employers Committee.
Has it been agreed that parties are to have counsel?
Apparently it has, unless you would care to make an objection.
I have no objection.
Hide brains for hide hands. They should hire a heart while they're about it.
You will be representing the unions, Mr. Gosling?
I will be representing the workers as president of the National Transport Union. I have with me Mr. James Connolly and Mr. James Larkin.
So I see. And who is the gentleman to Mr. Larkin's right?
That is an excellent question.
James Brady, sir. I am appearing on behalf of the Builders, Labourers and General Workers Union.
Isn't that one of ours? What the blazes are you up, Brady? Who sent you?
The union I represent have no dispute whatsoever with their employers and yet find themselves directly victimized by this lockout. I have been engaged to represent their interests and see no reason why anyone should object to this.
What's going on here, Tim? Is this some class of theatre?
I don't think so.
Ought we say something?
No, not just yet. It's always wise to see how far the crack spreads before applying the chisel.
I intend to be heard unless and until my retainer is withdrawn by my client. If such is their wish, I shall withdraw without complaint, I can assure you my time could be more profitably occupied elsewhere.
You should be on the other side of the table. You're cut from the same fine cloth.
I'm disinclined to disbar any interested party from this commission. Nevertheless, it would seem, Mr. Brady, that it would simplify matters considerably if you were to consult with your clients as to how they wish to proceed. I propose to adjourn to facilitate that consultation. Are there any objections?
We have none whatsoever. We are just anxious that the process proceed as swiftly as possible.
As are we all. 1 hour, Mr. Brady. Commission is adjourned.
What the hell's going on here, Brady?
I am fulfilling my brief
my
in
brief.
accordance with... Mr. Larkin, my clients deal in the business of trades unionism, not of Larkinism. Their ends are not the same as yours, and you are ill-suited to champion them.
Might I offer your clients some professional advice?
Certainly, although they pay poorly enough.
Well, perhaps you might advise them on my behalf that when Murphy's kind of finished with me and my men, and when they've ground our bones into the dirt, that your clients can have the playing field to themselves. Tell them that they can rely on Murphy's charity when that day comes, and it will. Or they can rely on me, now, today.
I prefer to make my own speeches, Mr. Larkin, but I shall certainly communicate your sentiments to my clients. Good afternoon.
Murphy! Mr. Murphy, sorry, you dropped the shilling.
That's quite all right. You may keep the shilling.
You better take it. Men have starved for want of less, you know.
Mr. Brady, have you consulted with your clients?
I have.
And what is the verdict?
I regret to inform the Commission that my services are no longer required. I've been, if I may say so, locked out. I thank the court for its indulgence. If I may make an observation...
This isn't the Abbey.
Nor is it the balcony of the Imperial Hotel, Mr. Larkin. Now, without wishing to impugn Mr. Gosling's abilities, it seems to me incongruous that an Irish trade union would rather be represented by an imported foreign layman than a qualified Irish solicitor. I believe in union circles such practice is condemned as scabbing.
Alas, that is not relevant to our inquiries, Mr. Brady. Thank you for your time.
Here, here.
Gentlemen, let us proceed with our business. Now, after due consideration, gentlemen, I think it best that the Commission remain open to the public and press for its full duration.
With respect, I think that's unwise. Men outside, starving and destitute. A public inquiry can only serve to draw the matter out.
We have engaged in extensive negotiations in private, which have only resulted in deadlock. My clients wish to put their case before the public and to refute the lies that have been told about them.
Mr. Healy, the purpose of this commission is not publicity, rather the ending of that deadlock. Nevertheless, we will proceed in public session. Now, I think it's high time we commenced with opening statements. Brief opening statements, if you would. I propose that Mr. Healy begins with the case for the employers.
It should be brief, all right, if he has any honesty about him.
In the past 5 years, the city of Dublin has witnessed or been subjected to more strikes than at any other time in its history.
Here, here.
Quiet!
At present, there are ongoing industrial disturbances in the following trades: steamship companies, canal companies, tramway companies, carters, timber merchants, grain merchants, soap makers, box makers, biscuit makers, builders, glaziers, confectioners, news agents, millers, newspapers, farmers, and horseshoers.
You forgot the hairdressers?
No, the fact that Mr. Larkin perceives the current situation as a cause of levity, and even as a triumph, comes as no surprise. For this crisis has crawled mewling and puking directly from Mr. Larkin's strategy of the sympathetic strike. A strategy whereby workers in workplaces unaffected by the disturbances nonetheless lay down their tools in solidarity. It is a peculiar form of solidarity, one must reflect, that serves to ruin and impoverish everyone involved. Now, we wish to assure the Commission and the general public and the workers of Dublin, the majority of whom have and want no part in these destructive practices, that our quarrel is not with trades unions, but with the grotesque doctrine propounded by Mr. Larkin and his associates. A doctrine from which every upright and honest man of labor in these three kingdoms must shrink in shame and embarrassment.
Musty. According to whom? We don't take our lead from King's Counsel.
No further interruptions, if you please, Mr. Larkin. All sides will be heard in time.
In our evidence, we will show that Mr. Larkin's actions are repugnant to everything fine and just and admirable in the tradition of trades unionism. Mr. Larkin has waged unremitting war against the creators of wealth and employment. 3 times the employers of this city, the guardians and guarantors of its prosperity, have concluded agreements extremely favorable to Mr. Larkin and the members of his union. 3 times Mr. Larkin has shamefully torn those agreements to shreds. Now, we do not suggest that Mr. Larkin is not a man of considerable skill and ability. Indeed, it requires remarkable skill to rally tens of thousands of workers to a cause that will only result in their ruination. Now, I propose to skip over Mr. Larkin's activities elsewhere, in Belfast, Wexford, Cork, Derry, the cities where his activities have always left a trail, sometimes of blood, but always of trouble. Instead, I intend to mention the notorious railway strike of 1911. A strike mounted upon so flimsy a pretext as to shame every honest trade unionist to the bone. Here, Mr. Larkin brought Ireland, town and country alike, almost to a complete standstill, contriving an industrial disturbance in a timber yard. It spread, as he hoped and assured it would, to the railway network. For this is Mr. Larkin's ultimate goal. Not justice for the working man, but sheer, unbridled chaos, amidst which he means to sow the seeds of anarchy.
If I'm not mistaken, the chair asked for opening statements on the lockout, not an endless tirade against a member of our delegation.
Counsel is entitled to make his case in his own way, but I would be obliged if he would work towards a conclusion.
I only have this to say in conclusion. Between men and their masters, there will always be differences. But any master who shuns compromise and reason cannot hope to flourish. What Mr. Larkin has achieved, he has achieved through intimidation, threats, and sheer thuggery. And to those things, No man, be he man or master, should ever yield. My clients have been cast in the role of victimizers and exploiters in Mr. Larkin's fetid and scurrilous newspaper. I put it to you that it is they who are the victims, they who have been exploited, and not in the name of trades unionism, but in the name of chaos and anarchy. The fruits of this process flow liberally in tears and blood through the gutters of this city. Now, my clients will play their part in reaching a resolution, but they will not surrender their dignity or their rights in so doing.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. I think with the consent of all parties, we might conclude there for today. The commission is adjourned until Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Thank you all for your attendance. Now,
Gas and froth is all it was. A fireworks display for the newspaper men.
It was a declaration of war, Harry. And if we don't match it, they're gonna march all over us.
The facts are on our side.
This was about the facts, Harry. Murphy wouldn't dare show his face. 20,000 of my men are going to open their newspapers tomorrow, and they're going to read on empty stomachs about Larkin the parasite, Larkin the antichrist, Larkin the untouchable. They're going to read how that damn cheat weasel slandered me to my face, and I sat there like a scolded schoolboy, and I took it.
There's somewhat more than your public image at stake here, Jim.
Those men are out starving on those streets, Harry, because I told them they could win. Because I told them I could win. Faith is a fragile thing. If you don't challenge a blasphemy, it becomes gospel.
Don't preach at me, Jim. I'm not a Sunday school.
Harry, this isn't a dressmaker's strike in Kensington. It's not false on both sides. A firm handshake and back to the shop for crumpets. Murphy is out to crush us. Not for 6 months or 5 years or 10 years, but for generations. And if he can't do it in court, he'll take it to the street, where every baton, bayonet and bullet in Dublin will be his to command.
What's the course to telegram Mexico?
Mexico?
It's Pancho Villa you boys want here, not Harry Gosling.
Harry Gosling will do. I'm afraid you've fallen amongst Celtic savages here, old boy. When our bosses ask for compromise, what they want is surrender. When they praise your moderation, they're rejoicing in your weakness. You do well to remember that, Harry.
What does it cost to telegram Mexico?
I'll have a lad step by the GPO and find out.
Mr. Gosling, are you ready to deliver your opening statement?
Mr. Connolly will be responding on our behalf.
Very well. Before we begin, I should like to add that there has been an excess of heat and want of light in our deliberations to date. If it is beyond the parties to display good faith as a mark of respect to the court, I would ask them to do so as a mark of respect to their fellow citizens, whose suffering has struck me acutely since my arrival here. Mr. Connolly, please begin.
Thank you. To begin with, I must say that while we appreciate the opportunity to address the court, it is neither the first nor the last of our concerns, either today or at any other time. With due respect, the ultimate tribunal to which we appeal to is rather the class to which we belong. That class of workers who form the worn and rusted cogs of the capitalist system, and whose bodies and souls are whittled to naught to reap the profits of the gentleman opposite. We are not therefore here to comfort or assuage some vague entity known to the newspapers as the general public, nor do we have an overwhelming desire to preserve the public order, though we hope never to disturb it without cause. Nor is our purpose to allow the capitalist class of this city to resume business as usual. Our goal, plainly and simply, is the triumph of our class, the working class, against all hazards and all opponents. Mr. Healy, in his rather lurid opening remarks, states at least one truth: that Dublin, in the past 5 years, has experienced more strikes than ever in its recorded history. Perhaps it was Mr. Healy's exquisite sense of propriety which prevented him stating this complimentary fact: that Dublin, in its filth, in its poverty, in its injustice, and its depravity, is a disgrace to human civilization. These two facts belong together, as does any cause and effect. Mr. Murphy makes much of his dignity, which he intends to preserve against us ruffians and barbarians. But we are proud to represent men who sweat and toil in the most undignified conditions imaginable, but who nonetheless have the courage to stand steadfast against this lockout, this mad enterprise of Mr. Murphy's. We are proud of the solidarity of the people of Dublin and of all the peoples of these islands. Creators of wealth, as Mr. Healy describes them, are in fact the creators of injustice, of servitude, of misery. They already dictate the conditions to which our members are forced to exist. They will not dictate the measures we take and the bonds we forge to scourge those conditions from the face of the earth.
We will adjourn for luncheon. Thank you, Mr. Connolly. The tribunal will resume with evidence for the employers.
Mr. Gosling, I'm sorry you're feeling unwell.
Oh, I'm as well as can be expected.
Oh, my apologies. It's just that when you didn't take up your case this morning, well, I just assumed something was amiss.
Well, the statement was more in Mr. Connolly's line than my own.
Yes, I noticed that. I think everybody did. Your hat, Mr. Gosling. Mr. Jacob, how long has your family operated the factory which bears your name?
Since 1851.
And in that time, you have become one of the most renowned manufacturers of biscuits in these islands, if not the world.
Oh, certainly the world.
Tell me, Mr. Jacob, how many people are employed at your factory?
Well, a week before the strike, we had on our books some 1,059 men and 2,085 women.
And girls.
And girls, yes.
And now tell me, Mr. Jacob, when did you first cross paths with Mr. Larkin?
It was during the strike of 1911. He kept up a ceaseless campaign against myself and my colleagues in the pages of his newspaper, The Irish Worker, from that point onward.
And could you describe this campaign for us?
Yes, we were called tyrants, bloodsuckers, and plenty more besides. Now, my own skin is pretty thick, and I paid no heed to these insults. But when he began to attack our girls, that was altogether more serious.
Your girls?
Yes. One of the girls who worked in our factory complained that she'd been victimized and ostracized because she refused to join Mr. Larkin's union. As a result, she was slandered viciously in the pages of his newspaper by name and address.
And this happened more than once?
Oh, to more than one of our girls, yes.
And did you take steps?
I had no choice. I may be, by Mr. Larkin's lights, a tyrant and a bloodsucker. But I will not stand by and see a young girl brutalized.
What measures did you take?
We posted notices prohibiting the wearing of union badges, the badges of the ITGWU. These were being used, we understood, to mark out and terrorize those who refused to join the union.
Could you tell us what effect the activities of Mr. Larkin and the current strike have had on your business?
The effect of this strike has been to weaken Irish industry to the advantage of our competitors abroad. I believe that was also its purpose. Mr. Larkin wants to do away with Irish wealth and industry altogether. He will not be content until he does so.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. We'll recess for a few moments to prepare for the cross.
There's no need for a delay. I'm quite happy to cross-examine Mr. Jacob here and now.
Very well.
Mr. Jacob.
Excuse me. I would rather Mr. Larkin addressed his questions through the chair, if that is all right.
Mr. Jacob spoke very movingly a moment ago about his chivalrous defence of young girls. Well, I have a few comments to make about young girls that will bring tears to his eyes. Why doesn't he tell the court about the young girls he locked out before the Shackleton strike even began?
Mr. Jacob, do you understand to what Mr. Larkin is referring?
I think so, although there was no lockout. A number of our girls continued to wear badges to work after we had warned them verbally and in writing not to do so. As such, they forfeited their jobs.
For wearing a badge.
A badge which was a symbol of intimidation and terror.
Do you often feel intimidated and terrorized by young girls, Mr. Jacob?
Through the chair, please.
Where I come from, Mr. Jacob, a man who can't look his opponent in the eye, he might be considered a coward.
You must not insult the witness, Mr. Larkin.
Mr. Larkin, a coward is a man who hides behind young girls.
Well, there we are in agreement. Will you answer my questions?
Ask your questions.
What wages do you pay female beginners at your factory? I believe it's a simple enough answer. While we enjoy this mime show, ladies and gentlemen, let me be the first to remind you that it was Mr. Healy who wanted a public hearing. Are you ready to answer my question?
Yes. The standard rate for a female beginner, a young girl, is 4 shillings.
4 shillings per week.
That's right.
And for males?
More than that.
A whole 5 shillings, I'm told.
Why ask the question if you already know the answer?
I didn't think anyone would believe me.
For the record, we should note that 4 shillings and 6pence is the minimum legal wage under the Trades Board Act.
I gave Mr. Larkin the minimum rate because that is the rate he asked for. Our maximum is very much higher.
What overtime rates do you pay your men?
I'm sorry. I simply must protest. Mr. Larkin is placing Jacobs under a microscope in a public hearing. He is undermining an established Irish firm in the face of its competitors in England and Scotland. Now, my clients came here today in good faith in order to get Dublin back to work, not to turn it into a laughingstock in the eyes of the world.
If Jacob's overtime rates would make them a laughingstock, I think Mr. Healy has already answered my question.
That is not what I meant.
Mr. Jacob, is it true that the men in your factory are forbidden from whistling?
No. Only when the whistling is done to alert the men to the presence of a manager. then it becomes a threat to our business.
You see threats everywhere, Mr. Jacob. You hold these men's lives in your hands, yet you cannot tolerate them whistling or wearing badges. You refuse to discuss wages. You refuse to discuss overtime or conditions. What is the point of your being here at all?
Am I then to take it, Mr. Larkin, you have no further questions for Mr. Jacob?
None that he can answer without embarrassing himself, it seems.
Thank you, Mr. Jacob. You are excused. We adjourn until tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock.
The man is impossible. Yes, and a little astray in the head, I feel.
It's like waltzing with a hurricane.
But you waltz beautifully, George. Bravo.
Larkin didn't lay a glove on you. The more he blusters, the sooner he'll blow himself out.
Who's next on the chopping block?
I am. Tomorrow afternoon, say a prayer for me, won't you?
God, I think, has given up on Dublin.
Oh, I don't think he's given up on us. I think he has merely left matters in the hands of his representative here on Earth.
Mr. Larkin, how do you feel about today's proceedings?
Who are you?
Daniel McCullum, Southland Times.
Never heard of it.
It's one of the biggest newspapers in southern New Zealand, sir.
And what's the biggest?
Well, Christchurch Press. We're catching them up.
Come back to me when you do.
2 minutes of your time, sir, please.
Show me your card. You have to be careful. Spies and dupes everywhere. That lot would stoop to anything.
I understand that, Mr. Larkin. What did you make of Mr. Jacob's evidence today?
Half of it was lies and half of it was fact.
Which parts were fact?
All the worst parts. Write that down.
How do you justify the sympathetic strike, Mr. Larkin? And why should good employers suffer for the sins of bad employers?
Do you have crocodiles in New Zealand, Mr. McCullum?
Not that I know of. I saw a gecko once in Dunedin.
The thing about crocodiles is there are no good crocodiles and there are no bad crocodiles. There are only hungry crocodiles and full crocodiles. The hungry ones will snap your leg off today. The full ones, tomorrow.
Are you saying Mr. Murphy is a hungry crocodile?
No. I'm saying he's a greedy crocodile. And they're the most dangerous of all. How many people work for the Southland Times?
Oh, about 100 back home. Just me over here.
Do you belong to a union?
Did you examine the dossier, Jim?
Thoroughly.
Where is it?
This one?
The dossier.
I dropped it in the bath.
On purpose?
No, but I do think it was fate.
Jim. Jim, in a short while, you're going up against two of the most able and diabolical minds of their generation. You can't just throw away the hymn sheet like you did with Jacob. These boys won't buckle.
I have something better than the hymn sheet up my sleeve.
The facts, I hope.
Better than the facts, Harry. The truth.
Mr. Healy, who is your next witness?
Mr. William Martin Murphy.
Mr. Murphy, as you know, this is not a sworn tribunal, but I trust you will assist us in getting at the truth to the best of your ability.
Of course.
Mr. Murphy, you may well be the most renowned man in Ireland at present.
The second most renowned, perhaps.
Indeed, although there are those who would say that fame and notoriety are quite distinct. Now, when did you become chairman of the United Tramway Company?
In 1903.
And of the Irish Independent newspapers?
In 1900.
And how would you characterize your relationship with your employees and their unions at that time?
Entirely amicable. Excellent, I should say. We never had a moment's trouble with our men until Mr. Larkin persuaded them of their misfortune.
And you have always upheld the right of a man to join a union?
Always. Yes, provided there is good faith on both sides, it's positively essential to an employer to know who he's dealing with.
Now, in relation to the tramway company, how did the trouble start there?
Oh, it was the same story, the same familiar pattern. Mr. Larkin's newspaper and his public pronouncements made it clear that some sort of confrontation was imminent.
And you, of course, took steps to nip it in the bud.
Yes, precisely. I called a meeting of the tramway men at midnight on the 19th of July.
At midnight?
Yes, the threat seemed grave enough to warrant it.
And what was the outcome of this meeting?
I again informed the men of my suspicions regarding Mr. Larkin and his influence over them. I made it clear that they couldn't possibly survive the conflict into which Mr. Larkin was pitching them for his own ends. I also awarded the men a raise of 1 shilling per week, in addition to more leave.
Now, was this in response to Mr. Larkin's threats?
Absolutely not. It had been planned for some time. In fact, we delayed the raise on foot of Mr. Larkin's threats. We did not wish to be seen to be intimidated. Mr. Larkin thrives on such displays of weakness.
Do we have the pamphlet that Murphy gave to the men at this meeting?
We did. But it's currently swimming down a plug hole on its way to the Irish Sea.
Well, you better have it if you're conducting the cross-examination.
Keep it. Have it memorized.
Now, when did the strike at the tramway company erupt in earnest?
It was late in August. I believe it was the 23rd. Mr. Larkin made a further speech in which he said the men and the union were now strong enough to start a fight.
And those were his exact words?
As reported to me, yes. We issued a circular to the men declaring that we had no fear of a strike and that it wouldn't survive a day.
To what ends?
To reassure the public as much as anything else.
And the strike itself began precisely at 9:40 a.m. on the Thursday.
Yes, I believe it was time to cause the greatest inconvenience possible. Most of the trams were simply dumped in the middle of the street. The men took off and left them there.
And yet, despite this, you had the network up and running within the day.
Within the hour. It's been operating at full capacity ever since.
Well, now, I think we can all agree that that is a great credit to you. Now, Mr. Murphy, earlier you described the depths to which Mr. Larkin has descended in his vicious assaults upon you. Now, do you recognize this cartoon which has been published in his newspaper?
Oh, yes, indeed I do.
Could you describe it to the court, please?
I can try. It appears to be a depiction of me as the vulture of Dartry Hall, though the likeness is not quite exact. I am standing over the body of a man who is bleeding from the head. Perhaps he has been rioting.
Could you read the caption, please?
The demon of death spread his wings on the blast and spat in the face of the poor as he passed.
Now, Mr. Murphy, could you explain to us Mr. Larkin's vicious resentment towards you?
I could not. You should have to ask him.
But surely you have some idea, some theory.
My theory is that Mr. Larkin has grown accustomed to browbeating and intimidating his opponents, be they employers or opponents within his union. It is not in my nature to seek out confrontation, but nor am I inclined to submit to bullying from Mr. Larkin or from anyone else. Mr. Larkin simply cannot reconcile himself to that fact. It offends his opinion of himself. He regards it as a blasphemy.
Yes, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Murphy.
I think we can do without the applause and cheering, ladies and gentlemen. You haven't come to witness a prize fight. Are you ready to cross-examine Mr. Larkin?
Mr. Murphy. I hope you're not going to make me address you through the chair or any of that Jacob's tomfoolery.
No.
Well, we're on excellent terms already. Mr. Murphy, how long have you been in business?
What kind of business?
There is only one kind.
I took over the family construction business in 1863, when my father died.
And then you became a railway contractor?
Yes. The first railway I built was the Wexford to Rosslare line, now part of the Great Southern Western.
You built it all yourself, did you? How did you acquire the contract for the Wexford Railway? What concessions did you get?
I got no concessions. It was a public competition.
Oh, please, what is the relevance of this? We came here to end the lockout. Why is Mr. Larkin harking back to 1863? We may as well be debating the Battle of Clontarf.
We might indeed. There's a great deal of treachery and backstabbing there too.
I am inclined to agree with Mr. Healy. Mr. Larkin, please confine yourself to the lockout and related matters, if you would.
Mr. Murphy, in your little duet with Mr. Healy earlier, you were both at pains to point out your excellent relationship with trades unions. Do you recall the railway strike of 1911?
Of course. You've dealt with it extensively at this tribunal.
You were eager to take credit for the crushing of that strike, were you not?
I was not.
You said so publicly.
I said nothing of the kind, in public or in private. I noted by way of warning that the railway strike of 1911 was defeated inside 3 weeks, despite the forces marshalled by the Union.
A warning in relation to the current lockout?
Yes.
This was a threat?
It is not I who deals in threats.
Who is it then?
You yourself have incited people to murder me.
When?
In your newspaper.
Mr. Murphy, do I look like the type of man who incites people to murder?
I don't know what you look like.
Should I come closer? There's a constable outside. You should be safe enough.
You, Mr. Larkin, don't frighten me in the slightest. A man is not equal to the forces he commands.
Well, there we are in agreement, Mr. Murphy. What is the purpose of your ownership of the Irish Independent newspaper?
I don't understand the question.
To what ends do you use the newspaper?
To elucidate matters of interest and to inform the general public.
And also to generate a profit for yourself?
It's a popular newspaper.
But you also use it to attack the workers' movement and your political enemies at every opportunity.
No.
You heap scorn on working men and their unions ceaselessly, and me in particular.
This is nonsense.
Have you not for the past 4 years employed 2 men by the names of McIntyre and Kelly, whose sole purpose has been to libel and defame me?
Their column is open to any matter of public interest. You interest the public greatly for various reasons.
Do you read your own newspaper at all, Mr. Murphy?
Not every last word. Certainly not the sporting columns.
Mr. Murphy, I hope you'll be honest enough to acknowledge your authorship of this pamphlet. It contains the text of your speech to the tramway men at your firm on July 19th.
Those are my words, as I confirmed earlier.
I'd like to quote from it as follows. Now, we are aware of all that is going on. We know perfectly well the people and the number of people involved in fomenting this strike. You are to bow down before this gentleman Larkin and obey his commands. I tell you now, his commands will never be given. And if it is, it will be Mr. Larkin's Waterloo. What chance would you men have, without wages and without funds, against a company which could and would spend £100,000 or more to put down such terrorism? Mr. Murphy, you speak eloquently against intimidation and coercion. What do you call this pamphlet?
I call it a statement of bald fact. Facts are occasionally stark.
What is intimidation? What do you understand by the word?
The dictionary definition is adequate, I find.
If I say to a man, would you like to join this union or that union? Is that intimidation?
I don't believe so.
And if you, as an employer, take against a particular union and say to a man he will lose his livelihood and his children will starve if he joins that union, is that intimidation? Is that intimidation, Mr. Murphy?
I shouldn't think so, no.
Well, I suspect the dictionary might be of a different opinion. You should consult it more often. Elsewhere in this pamphlet, you boast that in the event of a strike, the shareholders will still have their 3 meals a day. What did you mean by that?
I meant only that the implication was that you were leading the men into an uneven struggle, a hopelessly uneven struggle.
A struggle in which you would starve them out?
Not intentionally, but that was the inevitable outcome.
An outcome to which you were indifferent?
No, that is why I gave the warning.
Mr. Murphy, whose conscience is it on if a man starves or if his children starve because you deny him work?
I am not obliged to provide any man with work. Men starve in every country on the globe.
I have nothing more to say to you, Mr. Murphy.
And that, gentlemen, brings us to the conclusion of the case for the Employers' Committee. Mr. Gosling, is it your intention to call witnesses?
I think that as far as the rights and wrongs of this case are concerned, we have heard all the testimony we need here.
Very well, then we shall proceed to final statements. Mr. Healy, would you care to make a statement?
No, merely to offer a vote of thanks to yourself and to all those who have assisted in your inquiries. My clients look forward to your report, which we hope will be a beacon of light in these darkened times. You have their complete confidence.
Thank you for that statement, Mr. Healy. I appreciate it. Mr. Gosling, have you any remarks to make in closing?
I think Mr. Larkin would like to say something.
You may begin when you're ready, Mr. Larkin.
We've been privileged these past few days to hear from some of the keenest intellects in Irish life. Men such as Mr. Healy, and indeed Mr. Murphy, who is perhaps the ablest and most astute capitalist in all of Europe, if not the world. That these men should use their intellect and their eloquence in defence of so despicable a system as currently exists in Dublin. We are not in want of tragedy in this city, but that waste, that misuse of human genius is yet another tragedy to heap on the pile. Mr. Murphy and his class, for let there be no doubt, that is what they are. A unified class with a common purpose. For all their petty competition and all their petty jealousies, when they're threatened by the claims of a working man to a decent wage and a decent life, They bond together like a pack of wolves. They draw a circle around themselves and they cry, "No one must touch me." They claim for themselves the very right which they would deny to our class, the right to combine in union and solidarity. But where we would use that right to raise up every man and woman on earth to mutual splendor, they use it to degrade, to deprive, and to crush the soul of the great mass of people, the better to hoard the riches of this earth for themselves. Riches which they could never expend in 1,000 lifetimes in this world, let alone the next. These men, whose souls are steeped and seared in the grime of profit-making, presume to dictate the rights, the hopes, the aspirations, the very stuff of life of those whose sweat and blood they exchange for pounds and pence. Mr. Healy, as I have said, is a man of unique gifts. That's why he was engaged by these men, to paint a picture and to hold it up to the light and to say, this is the truth. But he couldn't do it. He has the technique, he has the craftsmanship, but he has not the soul. I have lived among the working classes all my life. I have starved because men such as these, denied me food. Sir Charles Cameron, as eminent a man as Sir Charles Cameron, reports that there are 21,000 families living in single rooms in Dublin, 5 to a room on average. Perhaps 60,000 children whose first experience of the world, whose grounding in life, is a filthy, verminous hovel in a city which harbours such wealth as sustains these men opposite. Will they take responsibility for that? If the system which elevates them to such heights condemns countless others to such depths, who else should take responsibility? We've heard much over the past few days of shillings and speeches and profits and hours. We have heard nothing, certainly from Mr. Healy and his paymasters, of those truths which remain hidden behind every factory wall in Dublin, of the men and boys and girls maimed in body and soul by this diabolical pursuit of profit. Hands cut off, eyes put out, scarred forever and then thrown onto the human scrap heap like yesterday's cokes, when these men can no longer wring any more profit from their broken bodies. And the men who perpetrate these barbarities esteem themselves Christians and gentlemen, and troop back and forth in gilded carriages to Dublin Castle and the Mansion House to be garlanded with gold chains and flowers. And all of this goes on in 1913 in Dublin, by repute the greatest church-going city in all of Christendom. Mr. Jacobs said earlier that I was out to abolish trade in Ireland entirely. If by trade he means the exploitation, the despoiling of everything noble in the human heart for the purpose of profit, then he was right. What men like him cannot understand, and will never understand, is that the working men of Dublin have not bonded together to act as the social conscience for this system. We have not come here to save the soul of capitalism, because it has no soul to save. What is the basis on which men like Jacob, men like Murphy, and all their kind claim their power? To listen to them these past few days, you might think that they ruled by acclaim, that they were of such paramount intelligence that we submit willingly to their whims. This is the basis of their power. This is the herald of their gospel. This is what lurks behind every fine phrase which spills from Healy's mouth. We know only too well the consequences of challenging that power. We challenge it nonetheless. We challenge it because not to do so has become intolerable. What Mr. Murphy is faced with, what he has never been faced with before, is a movement of men who have worn their chains so long that the steel has seeped into their hands, who will not, because they cannot, allow their children to continue to inhabit this same joyless shell of a world created in Murphy's image, who will not allow Christ to be crucified in Dublin by these men.
Mr. Larkin, sir, it's past 6 o'clock. I have to throw you out.
I warn you, Doran, I have a baton in my hand.
Where did you get it?
One of your friends dropped it in Sackville Street.
Do you mind if I take it back?
You may as well. I'm sure I'll be seeing it again anyway.
I'd leave it with you as a souvenir. Only whoever dropped it will have to pay for a replacement. Did you sort it all out?
Gosling hopped on a mailboat without a word. Connolly's gone to practice his shooting, and I'm sure Murphy's going to try and have me killed.
Should that be against the law?
You arrest him when the day comes.
I might have a wee word with the commissioner to be on the safe side.
You're a wise man, Doran. At the whim of savages.
How much longer do you think this will go on for?
For as long as men like you would rather swing batons than parry them.
Parry them at our heads, is it? I'm a bit old for that game. Right, Mr. Larkin. Off we go.
Your youngest, she must be 15 or 16 now.
She's dead 3 years, Mr. Larkin. Consumption, God rest her.
I'm very sorry.
We Joey's living with a fat old widow in Strabane, idling away off the husband's estate.
You should send him down to me. I give him plenty to do.
I couldn't have him carrying on with the likes of you, Mr. Larkin. Nothing will shift him, short of a war.